So, how do you take 5,000 years of dense, complicated history and boil it all down into just 5 minutes? It sounds pretty much impossible, right? But the story of the Middle East, which is literally the cradle of civilization, it's a story of powerful patterns. You see empires rise and fall, ideas completely transform society, and lines get drawn on maps that, believe it or not, shape the world we all live in right now.
All right, so here's how we're going to tackle this massive story. We're going to start at the very beginning with the first empires. Then we'll see how world-changing faiths were born. From there, we'll dive into an incredible golden age of science and culture. Then watch as old empires collapse. And finally, we'll connect all those ancient dots to the conflicts that define the region today.
Okay, let's start at the very beginning, in a place called Mesopotamia, the Fertile Crescent. This is where humanity basically invented everything. We're talking about the first cities, the first laws, and even writing itself. It was a land of firsts, and it set a pattern that would repeat for thousands of years.
And that really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? How did the place where it all began become one of the most complex and fought-over regions on the entire planet? Well, we're going to peel back the layers and find out. Now, what's so fascinating here is the cycle you can see playing out. First, you get amazing innovation from groups like the Sumerians. Then comes conquest. Bigger and bigger empires, from the Akkadians to the mighty Persians, swallow up everything. And each new power, like Alexander the Great's Greeks and then the Romans, they don't just erase what came before, they build right on top of it, adding their own layer of culture and control.
Okay, so empires rise and fall, but the next big shift? It wasn't about swords and armies, it was about ideas. A massive spiritual revolution was brewing that would completely redefine the soul of the region and honestly, the entire world.
Think about that for a second. In just a few hundred years, a faith that started out in a tiny corner of the Roman Empire completely took over. Christianity replaced all the old pagan gods and laid a totally new spiritual foundation for the Middle East and for Europe.
And right here, this is where you get the perfect storm. You had the two regional superpowers, the Byzantine Romans and the Sasanian Persians, who had been fighting each other for so long that they were both completely exhausted, militarily, financially, you name it. This created a huge power vacuum.
So the force that rushed in to fill this vacuum wasn't just another king or another empire. This was something totally new. Coming out of Arabia, Islam brought with it the caliphate, a revolutionary idea that combined political and religious power into one, and it expanded with unbelievable speed. And this new Islamic empire, it kicked off an absolutely incredible era of discovery and culture. But, as we've already seen, big success often brings big new problems, both from the inside and from very, very far away.
I mean, just look at what was happening in Baghdad. It was, without a doubt, the intellectual center of the planet. At a place called the House of Wisdom, scholars were translating all the Greek philosophy and science that Europe had forgotten. But they didn't just preserve it. They built on it, making huge leaps in algebra, medicine. For centuries, this was where the action was.
And then, it all came crashing down. In 1258, Mongol armies swept in and sacked Baghdad. They destroyed the city, its libraries, everything. It was a brutal, catastrophic end to the Islamic Golden Age.
You know, they say history abhors a vacuum, and it's true. Out of the chaos the Mongols left behind, a new power began to rise, the Ottomans. They would build the last of the great Middle Eastern empires, and its long, slow collapse would give birth to the modern world that we know.
And the Ottomans, wow, their rise was just slow, steady, and unstoppable. They started small, but then in 1453, they did the unthinkable. They conquered Constantinople, the capital of the 1,000-year-old Byzantine Empire. After that, they took over much of the Arab world, creating one massive empire once again.
Okay, pay attention here because this is so important for understanding the Middle East today. As the Sunni Ottomans got stronger, they ran right into the new Shia Safavid Empire in Persia. Their rivalry lasted for centuries, and it wasn't just political. It hardened the religious divide between Sunni and Shia Islam, creating fault lines that are still shaking the region today. But nothing lasts forever. By the 1800s, the once unstoppable Ottoman Empire was in decline. People started calling it the sick man of Europe. And the rising European powers, they were circling like sharks, eager to grab territory and influence, especially after oil was discovered.
World War I was the final blow. The Ottomans picked the losing side, and their empire didn't just collapse, it was carved up like a turkey.
Britain and France had a secret plan all along. They literally took a ruler and drew straight lines on a map, creating countries like Iraq and Syria with absolutely no regard for the people who actually lived there. It was a recipe for disaster.
So yeah, these new borders, drawn by outsiders, completely ignored thousands of years of tribal, ethnic, and religious history. They basically guaranteed 100 years of conflict over land, over resources, and over the very idea of who belonged where. And if you want to see just how messy this got, look no further. During the war, the British were making promises to everybody. They promised the Arabs their own kingdom if they fought the Ottomans. At the same time, they promised the Zionist movement a Jewish homeland in Palestine. And of course, they promised themselves and the French control of the whole area. It's like they promised the same house to 3 different families. It was never going to work.
So, what happens when the British finally pack up and leave Palestine in 1948? The whole thing explodes. War breaks out, and in the chaos, over 700,000 Palestinians were displaced from their homes. It's known as the Nakba, and it created a refugee crisis that, to this day, has never been resolved.
So, with the colonial powers gone, a big question hangs in the air. What's the new big idea? For a while, it was pan-Arab nationalism, the dream of one giant, united Arab country. But after several wars were lost, that dream kind of faded. That left an opening for 2 other ideas to get much stronger: political Islam, which argued the answer was a return to faith, and just good old-fashioned nationalism, focused on individual countries.
The last few decades have just been one earthquake after another. You had the Iranian Revolution in '79, which changed everything. Then the Gulf Wars brought a huge American military presence into the region. The 2003 invasion of Iraq completely upended the balance of power. And then the Arab Spring saw people rise up against dictators, which often led to even more chaos and civil war.
So that brings us pretty much to the present day. And the key thing to get is that there isn't just one single conflict driving everything. It's a bunch of overlapping rivalries. You've got the huge competition between Iran and Saudi Arabia. You've got Turkey trying to become a major power again. You've still got the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And now a new wrinkle with some Arab countries making peace with Israel.
And really, this is what it all boils down to. The Middle East today is a product of every single layer we've talked about. You can still feel the legacy of ancient empires, the religious divides that were hardened centuries ago, those crazy colonial borders, the long history of foreign powers getting involved, and of course the politics of oil. It's all happening at once.
You know, if there's one thing this incredible 5,000-year story shows us, it's that nothing in the Middle East stays the same for long. Its history is one of constant, relentless change. And that leaves us with the biggest question of all. What does the next chapter look like for this ancient and incredibly important part of our world?